on Friday to discuss the spending fight and border wall funding. Thank you very much for talking to us. I understand that no Democrats were present at that meeting?
No, I was not at that meeting as well, by the way. I was at the White House for a different meeting. But the fact is that there were no Democrats were present, and the president focused on the importance of border security, which included the fence. Some say tomato, some say tomato, but the reality of it is we're talking about some type of impenetrable defense mechanism that allows for us to use as part of the national border security conversation, and not specifically a wall, because we have 2,000 miles of lines that we have to cover. So it's not simply a border wall conversation. The broader conversation was around national security and border security.
Right. Well, the $5.7 billion that the president wants is to begin building the wall, because the final tab on a border wall would be over $20 billion. So this isn't necessarily to complete the project. It's to get it started. The White House acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, predicted on Sunday that it would be very possible, though, for this to drag on through the New Year's. So the question is, if a deal isn't cut by January, what happens when the new Congress comes in?
Well, this is, without any question, a Pelosi problem. There's no question that her speakership seems to be in balance against border security. That's a problem that they're going to have to solve on the Democrat side. Some would say that it gets easier after that problem is resolved on January the 3rd. The truth of the matter is we should not have that conversation whatsoever. This should be a conversation that we've had previously. When the Democrats were negotiating DACA, they were able to provide up to $25 billion for a wall. Under President Obama, they allowed for about $8 billion for border security. So now that Trump is president and speakership is on the line, we're talking about $1.3 billion that was in the continuing resolution. But there was a higher number that's already been approved by the Democrats, $1.6 billion. So the question is, what are our priorities as a nation? And it should start with security.
Right. And so the $1.3 billion that the Democrats are offering, they're saying will help enhance security. I don't know how that money is actually going to do that. But Nancy Pelosi, since you just mentioned her, set to become Speaker of the House, actually sent out a letter to her colleagues Saturday, just so you know where her head is. And she writes that until President Trump can publicly commit to a bipartisan resolution, there will be no agreement before January, when the new House Democratic majority will swiftly pass legislation to reopen government. What could break this stalemate?
Well, number one, money for the wall. No wall.
Democrats say they're not doing
where we are today.
So without that money for the wall,
we'll be here for a while.
I mean, past January. So then they say come January, they're going to reopen the government. How do they plan on doing so?
Well, we both know, Julie, that you cannot reopen the government without the president's authority, without the Senate concurring, and the House joining on as well. So the fact of the matter is, once again, it just reinforces the truth that today we find ourselves at a standstill because Pelosi's speakership is in peril. Therefore, we're going to have to wait until after the election. That doesn't make a lot of sense for the average American, and it certainly doesn't make sense on the border. So if we're going to move this game forward, we're going to have to do so by focusing on what's in the best interest of the average person in this country, and that is to have secure borders. How do we get there? We get there by the Democrats coming back to the table and taking seriously a proposal to meet in the middle and provide some resources for a wall, more resources for border security broadly, and then to move forward to having a true conversation about how to finish more security on our borders. We had a 30% increase in folks crossing our borders since last year.
Yes, there has been a major uptick in illegal immigration, and that's why the Republicans want to do something differently, not repeat the same mistakes of the past. And then you've got Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley basically saying that Democrats will not agree to any new funding for Trump's proposed border wall. And he says border security all the way. Okay, fine. But then he says, in fact, the president has a lot of money we gave him last year for border security, and he's not using it. We're not using money? I mean, what's your reaction to Merkley's comments? That can't, it's hard to believe that.
Well, Julia, we ought not believe it whatsoever, to be honest with you. Number one, the fact is that you have to use the money, use it wisely. We're doing so. Number two, Merkley is talking on two sides of the same coin. On one side, he says no money for walls. Trump's wall, which is where the emphasis is not on the wall. The emphasis is on Trump. We cannot govern this country by who's in the White House,
right,
whether we like them or not. That is not an objective standard that will meet the threshold of powerful, responsible, common sense leadership that America should expect from their elected officials. So we have to do something very different in this current environment,
right,
which is to realize that this is not Trump's wall. This is America's border security, and we should fund it because that is in our best interest. Right. I think in 2016 and 2017, more people crossed our southern border who did not come from Mexico than did come from Mexico. That should put a big red button on it and say, push. Right. Let's get rid of the questions and conversation around whether or not we're doing the right thing for America. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to do the right thing for America, it starts with national security at our borders, right, in addition to the immigration challenge that we face.
Okay, I got to switch gears regarding, Syria. We talk a lot about the premature withdrawal and what that has caused, the controversy swirling around that, which then, of course, led to James Mattis's premature withdrawal from the White House. When he resigned, he said that he would stick in there until February because he wanted to give the president due time to find a replacement. That all changed when the president tweeted the following: "I am pleased to announce that our very talented Deputy Secretary of Defense, Patrick Shanahan, will be assuming the title of acting Defense or Secretary of Defense starting January 1, 2019. Patrick has a long list of accomplishments while serving as deputy and previously Boeing. He will be great." I want to ask you about Shanahan and also about Mattis's early departure and what you believe led to that.
Well, there's no doubt that what led to Mattis's departure, and I think many of us are still in the mourning process of Mattis's departure, is that he and the president were just inconsistently aligned. There was no congruence there. And so I think the loyal thing to do, the honorable thing to do, is to resign and allow the president to have someone who's more consistent with his vision of foreign affairs and foreign military policy. I'm very sorry that Mr. Mattis is leaving us. Mad Dog will be missed without any question. It's a different conversation about who should replace him. We're going to have an acting person in the place, and Mr. Shanahan is a highly educated person from MIT, but the fact of the matter is that military culture that was developed over 40 years of experience has served this nation really well. All
right. Senator Tim Scott, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to you.
The shutdown for Christmas, the partial government shutdown that kicked in on Saturday at midnight, well, set to continue at least to Thursday when the Senate returns to Washington, but it could stretch into the new year. The main sticking point we know is the border security. President Trump demanding $5 billion for that border wall funding. Now the White House, though, saying it may settle for much less.
They are at 1.3 yesterday. We were at $5 billion a couple of days ago, and the counter offer that we gave them yesterday was between those two numbers.
But you 2.3.
We moved off of the 5. We hope they move up from their 1.3.
And at least one senator telling Maria he's optimistic a deal could get done soon.
I think we'll get to a deal this week. I talked to the president last night. He wants that. I think Senator Schumer has actually been dealing this week. It's just that at the end of the day, they backed up from what they had already agreed to. I'm hopeful that cooler heads will prevail. We'll get to some number between 1.6 and $5 billion.
Joining me now, former congressman and author of the upcoming book, Hold Texas, Hold the Nation, Victory or Death, retired Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Colonel West, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Good to be with you, Charles, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Let's talk about not necessarily Merry Christmas for the folks in D.C. This is a political high-wire act. President Trump and the Democrats are both on this, gauging each other, gauging the surroundings, the political implications of it and how far it might go.
Well, without a doubt, there will be some, political implications that the media mainly will try to drive out. But I think it is truly disingenuous that when you have a $4.4 trillion budget, when you have an omnibus spending bill that was just passed earlier this year, $1.3 trillion, that our federal government cannot find $5.7 billion to do one of their constitutional duties and responsibilities, and that's to protect the sovereignty of the United States of America and the American people. There's no way that you can tell me that people don't see this as being very important for the American people. We just saw about 3 Sundays ago when the migrant caravan charged our southern border, and they breached our border through an area that was very porous, and they could just push it back. So if we're serious about protecting the American people, this is something that needs to be done. And all of this hoopla about a government shutdown, let's be very honest, this is a temporary reduction of non-essential personnel, and once everything is settled, they will be paid back.
Sure. And to your point, I think the Democrats understand that part of it. I think they put the finger in the wind and they understand, that the impression that they're against border security is a devastating idea. So they've tried to change the narrative and suggesting, well, maybe drones can do what a wall will do, or they keep referring to experts. I'm not sure who those experts are, saying that walls don't work. I mean, historically, they've worked throughout the history of mankind. So they seem to want to have it both ways, and that's their position right now.
Yes, but talk to the Israelis who put up a wall after those the first and second Intifada attacks, and look what happened to the reduction of terrorism. It's very interesting that the party that talks about abolishing our Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, the party that supports sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, will all of a sudden say that they care about border security. Border security cannot just be done by drones. You know, I've taken a motorcycle ride down through the Big Bend sector along the border here in Texas. And there has to be some places where you can put an obstacle up so that you can channel people into the areas where you could use these additional resources. But right now we have several different corridors that drug cartels and others use to infiltrate and come into the United States of America, and there is nothing that thwarts those efforts.
So, Colonel, I'm really curious to see, who do you think has more of an incentive to get something done quickly? Because, in January, we're going to have a switching of the House, which means it's going to be harder to get things passed. And really, no Republicans seem to want a compromise here. At least the support is the Republican voters saying, don't you dare flinch right now. You can see it with a lot of his base saying, you must go forward with this. Democrats are saying you absolutely cannot do the wall. So who do you think is going to bite the bullet and say, let's be the bigger person and get a deal done for America?
Well, I would say that the Democrats have more to lose, because as they take over control of the House of Representatives and they own the purse strings, I don't think you want to go into their control of the House looking weak on protecting the American people, because if we continue to have criminal, illegal aliens that are committing acts of violence and crimes against the American people, this is going to come back to haunt them. The Republicans need to stand fast, because it's been 2 years that they have had the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they have not done anything. So at least they can go out somewhat seeming like they're fighting.
Colonel West, good morning. Mitch Rochelle. At the end of the day, is this about a 4-letter word, wall? I'm sort of channeling Lee here as our word expert, but if all of the things that the Democrats have been talking about on the Sunday shows about, drones or additional personnel, that's fine, notwithstanding, but at the end of the day, are they really just trying to weaponize this word wall and not give the president a win so that he has something and sort of force him into that Bush 41 moment with no new taxes, so that when Trump's up for re-election, he can't claim that he got the wall built?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I would say it's about a 5-letter word, and that is Trump, because they don't want him to have any type of victory or success or whatever, so that he can come back in as he goes into re-election mode to say that this is what we accomplished. And that's a very dangerous thing when you put political and ideological agendas over the safety and security of the United States of America.
Peace and hope. Back in the 1980s, I went through clinical depression. And it's different. There are people that, and we all go through this, there are people that look at the holidays. It's the most wonderful time. Well, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not the most wonderful time of the year. Sometimes, for some people, it can be the worst time of the year. Because maybe you grew up with great parents and it was just the greatest holiday, and they decorated, and you remember it was the perfect tree and the family would get together, and you can't recreate that. For some reason, maybe your family is broken up, or maybe your kids are typical teenagers, or maybe you've lost your job. I remember being so broke I couldn't afford anything for Christmas. I remember Christmas Eve alone, a divorced guy living in this hellhole. Carpet smelled like soup, and I was laying down on the floor, feeling bad for myself on Christmas Eve because I was all by myself. And I realized this is not going to end well for me. And I had to choose. Some people, their Christmas was not happy as a child. People have lost loved ones. This is the first Christmas since fill in the blank passed away. We have a friend, we have two, that lost their husband or wife just recently. I can't imagine. I can't imagine losing Tanya, and how everything in my life would remind me of her. And how hard that would be. I can't imagine losing a child. I can't imagine it. But if that's what you are feeling, or if that is the kind of Christmas or holiday you're experiencing, I'd ask you to back up and re-examine Thanksgiving. Think about Thanksgiving. The pilgrims come over here. About half of them die in the boat. They're just dumping their children into the sea after they die. Imagine that. They get here. It is such hostile territory that they can't grow anything. Another half of the half that is left, die through the winter. Starvation, sickness, cold. Imagine having nothing. You are starving, and you're in the Northeast, and you are freezing, and you're all huddled under a blanket. And there is no such thing as medicine. You're just praying to make it to the next morning. And your child or your wife freezes to death. One of you starts to get sick, and you know that's a death sentence. You're trying to feed your child. You got nothing. Where is God? We came here for God. Where is God? Half of us died on the way here. Another half are dying in the next 8 months. Where is God? And when it was over, and they could plant crops, and they could plant corn, they stopped after the harvest to say, "Thank you, Lord." Only a quarter of them were left. Thank you. And it was such a celebration that we still remember it today.